A Boeing 747 was fully ready to take off on the runway. Amid dense fog, the pilot pushed the thrust levers forward, turned on the headlights, and the aircraft had now crossed takeoff speed, a speed beyond which returning is nearly impossible. But at that very moment, a shadow began to emerge through the fog, and that shadow was of another Boeing 747, which was on the same runway in the opposite direction, now just a few meters away. What happened next is hard to even imagine. The question is, how did the situation reach this point? What was the air traffic controller doing? And what was that one small mistake that led to the deadliest accident in aviation history? This tragic incident occurred in Spain's Canary Islands, which the world now remembers as the Tenerife Airport Disaster. Welcome once again to review its videos. This story begins a day before the accident, on March 26, 1977, when Pan Am Flight 1736, a Boeing 747 jumbo jet, took off from Los Angeles Airport. It was to land in New York to pick up some passengers, and then its final destination was the city of Las Palmas across the sea in the Canary Islands. This was a chartered flight, and for this reason, it was fully booked, carrying mostly elderly passengers who intended to enjoy a cruise ship in Las Palmas. Las Palmas is the capital of the Canary Islands, located about 100 kilometers from Morocco's coast, and is the southernmost part of Spain. This place is quite famous around the world for its tropical climate. But in 1977, behind the beautiful setting of the Canary Islands, there was hidden political tension. A group called MPIAC was raising its voice for independence of the Canary Islands from Spain and often used violence for its campaign. It was a similar violent event that started the sequence of this dangerous accident. Pan Am Flight 1736 picked up passengers from New York's JFK International Airport and departed for Las Palmas Island. Its cabin crew included 56-year-old Captain Victor Grubbs, 39-year-old First Officer Robert Bragg, and 46-year-old flight engineer George Warrens, along with 13 flight attendants and 380 passengers. These were the full details of Pan Am Flight 1736, now cruising over the Atlantic Ocean. Now let's turn to the other aircraft that was also going to become a victim of this accident. At Amsterdam Airport in the Netherlands, KLM Flight 4805 was getting ready. It too was a Boeing 747 and also headed to Las Palmas in the Canary Islands. Its cockpit had 50-year-old Captain Jacob, 42-year-old First Officer Klaus, and 48-year-old flight engineer William. It had 11 flight attendants and 235 passengers on board. After boarding, KLM Flight 4805 took off from Amsterdam International Airport. Now both these aircraft were headed toward Las Palmas Airport in the Canary Islands. Meanwhile, at Las Palmas Airport, two men approached the terminal building and placed a bag outside a flower shop before disappearing. This was a bag with a bomb equipped with a countdown timer. At exactly 1 p.m., a phone call came to the reception at Las Palmas Airport. The caller identified himself as part of the MPIAC group, the same group mentioned at the beginning of the video, and said that a bomb would explode at Las Palmas Airport in the next 15 minutes. The airport staff immediately sprang into action and evacuated the entire Las Palmas Airport before the 15-minute mark. Their rush turned into panic when, exactly 15 minutes later, a loud explosion occurred. Due to the blast, a large part of the terminal building's roof collapsed. Following this, all operations at Las Palmas Airport were suspended. All flights were canceled, and those scheduled to land were diverted. A short while later, KLM Flight 4805 from Amsterdam was approaching Las Palmas, but the air traffic controller informed them about the explosion at the airport and instructed them to land at Tenerife Islands Airport, which was 110 kilometers away. After an additional 25-minute flight, KLM's captain landed on runway 30 of Tenerife Airport at 1:38 p.m. At the same time, Pan Am Flight 1736 from New York also reached near Las Palmas and was diverted to Tenerife Airport. By now, almost all flights were being diverted to Tenerife Airport, as it was the nearest. Soon, the rush at Tenerife Airport began to increase. Let us tell you here that Tenerife Airport is indeed a small airport located in a hilly area, very close to the Atlantic Ocean. Its elevation is around 2,000 feet. The area is surrounded by high mountains, and because of this, the moist Atlantic winds strike the mountains, rise upwards, cool rapidly, and turn into clouds. This sudden weather change is very normal here. When the Pan Am and KLM flights landed at Tenerife Airport, visibility was fine, but then it suddenly reduced due to the clouds. When clouds covered the runway, visibility would reduce to as low as 300 meters, and the very next moment, everything would be clearly visible up to 2 kilometers. At this point, it was still unclear how long they would have to stay at the airport. The passengers were deboard so they could refresh after the long flight. Meanwhile, KLM Flight 4805, which had to return to Amsterdam, decided to refuel its fuel tank right there so that when Las Palmas Airport reopened, no time would be wasted in refueling. Just as they began refueling, news came that Las Palmas had reopened. Both flights began reboarding passengers, but due to KLM's refueling, the taxiway was blocked. Tenerife Airport is a small airport with only one runway, one taxiway, and one apron with a terminal building, which you can see in this animation. The presence of such heavy traffic here was quite abnormal, especially with jumbo jets. Due to KLM's refueling, Pan Am couldn't leave the terminal to reach the runway. They were told to wait near the terminal until KLM's refueling was complete. At 4:45, KLM's refueling was completed and the captain began preparing to move off the taxiway. Because the apron was full of other aircraft also blocking the taxiway, the controller instructed KLM's pilots, who were parked on the far west side of the taxiway, to taxi down the runway itself to the extreme east end, make a 180-degree turn, and prepare for takeoff. As KLM 4805 began taxiing, the controller instructed Pan Am to also follow down the runway, but to exit at C3 onto the taxiway, as KLM 4805 was to take off from that same runway. Visibility was quite low and getting worse by the minute. KLM 4805 taxied across the entire runway, reached the eastern end, made a 180-degree turn, and got into takeoff position. Pan Am's pilots also began taxiing down the runway, but due to fog, they could see exits C1 and C2 but missed C3, as it was returning toward the apron. Perhaps that's why they couldn't recognize it. Secondly, Tenerife Airport lacked proper sign marks. For runway exits, markers were placed on the tarmac itself, but these sign marks were missing here. When Pan Am Flight 1736 crossed exit C2, at that very moment, KLM 4805's captain requested takeoff permission from the control tower, and here began a series of back-to-back confusions. Due to the fog, the control tower couldn't see either aircraft, and there was no radar system installed at the airport. At this point, the control tower began telling KLM what route to take after takeoff, but nowhere in that message was takeoff clearance actually granted. But KLM assumed they had received takeoff permission, and the captain replied, "We are at takeoff." Whether he said, "We are at takeoff," or "We are taking off," is still unclear, but in response, the control tower said, "Okay." A few seconds later, the tower clarified, "Stand by for takeoff, I will call you." This was a very important message clearly stating not to take off yet. But this message never reached KLM's cockpit, because at that very moment, near exit C3, Pan Am Flight 1730 SXS pilots, who were listening to the entire conversation, also relayed a message, "We are still down the runway." That is, both the tower's message for KLM to stand by and Pan Am's message were transmitted at the same time, which resulted in only a distorted noise being heard in KLM's cockpit. Pan Am Flight 1736, now unknowingly having crossed C3, was told by the control tower to inform them once they exited the runway, to which the Pan Am pilots responded, "Okay." But by then, KLM Flight 4805's captain had already pushed the thrust levers forward, believing they had received takeoff clearance. At this point, KLM's flight engineer had heard the control tower's message to Pan Am and immediately informed the captain that Pan Am was still on the runway. But for some reason, the captain may have misunderstood in the noise and simply replied, "Oh yes," and continued with takeoff. Due to the fog, he could only see about 300 meters ahead. Meanwhile, Pan Am's pilots suddenly saw headlights through the fog on the runway. At first, they thought KLM might be stationary, but the very next moment, they realized it was rapidly approaching them. They quickly tried to turn the aircraft, but it was too late. KLM's right engine ripped through Pan Am's first-class section, breaking the landing gear, and the aircraft crashed 150 meters down the runway and caught fire. Since its fuel tanks were full, the intensity of the fire was extreme. All 248 passengers on board died instantly. Pan Am's passengers didn't even get the chance to understand what had happened. The first-class passengers were killed on the spot, but many passengers in the lower economy class managed to escape through holes in the ceiling. Several jumped from a height of 20 feet to save their lives. Out of Pan Am's 396 passengers, only 61 survived. Perhaps more lives could have been saved, but due to the fog, the control tower only learned of the accident after a delay when another aircraft parked on the apron saw flames on the runway and informed them. Even rescue vehicles couldn't move quickly due to the fog. In this accident, a total of 583 lives were lost in the blink of an eye. The investigation examined both aircraft's cockpit voice recorders, and all the details presented in this video were discovered from there. The investigation team concluded that the accident was caused by a chain of events. First, the bomb blast at Las Palmas. Then KLM refueling at Tenerife and blocking the taxiway. If that hadn't happened, Pan Am Flight 1736 would have taken off earlier. Then the sudden drop in visibility and Pan Am missing exit C3. But ultimately, the investigation team held KLM Flight 4805's crew responsible, because after all, they proceeded with takeoff without clearance, even though the flight engineer had warned the captain just 5 seconds earlier. The Tenerife Airport disaster became a wake-up call for the entire aviation industry. After this accident, many changes were seen in the industry. Call signs were modified, their rules were changed, radar was made mandatory at all airports, and holding points and indicators on runways were declared essential. Today, there are 2 airports on Tenerife Island. The one where the accident occurred is the northern airport, while a new airport has been built in the south, which is at a lower elevation and where visibility isn't affected by clouds and fog. We hope you will like and share this video by review it. Thank you very much for your loving comments. See you in the next amazing video. The Tenerife Airport disaster became a wake-up call for the entire aviation industry. After this accident, many changes were seen in the industry. Call signs were modified, their rules were changed, radar was made mandatory at all airports, and holding points and indicators on runways were declared essential. Today, there are 2 airports on Tenerife Island. The one where the accident occurred is the northern airport, while a new airport has been built in the south, which is at a lower elevation and where visibility isn't affected by clouds and fog. We hope you will like and share this video by review it. Thank you very much for your loving comments. See you in the next amazing video.